Thank you for being here. Uh, as is the pattern, we make a statement and the government responds. So last week I spoke about the moral hazard mentioned in the IMF report, the Article 4 consultations, and the moral hazard associated with tax amnesties. And this is what Minister Jordan said. He said, I do not know what all this nonsense about moral hazard that Jagdeo is talking about with the tax amnesty. The minister said that Jagdeo either does not understand the amnesty or is deliberately misleading the public. And he went on to say that he has not seen any report this is what the minister said here directly. Further, the Minister of Finance said he is yet to receive the IMF report for its last staff analyst, Starbuck News, Kaichor News. Now, I have a copy of the report, and I'm sure I'm one of the last persons to get a copy of this report, the Article 4 consultations. The first person to get that would be the Minister of Finance, and he has not seen the report as yet. And so he went on to say, I'm talking nonsense, and he has not seen the content of the report. So I'm not going to release the report, but I'm going to give you 2 pages of the report, pages 11 and 13 of the report, which both spoke about the moral hazard of tax amnesties. It says here on page 11, nonetheless, staff cautioned that the expectation of future amnesties can weaken compliance. That's on page 11. And then on page 13, it says, they noted that moral hazards associated with expectations of future tax amnesties are well contained, since the last amnesty was in the 1980s, and further amnesties are not expected. Obviously, the only reason this was mentioned in the report is because they're concerned about it. But our Minister of Finance has not seen the report as yet, although this is a report that goes directly to him, and it's been months since the report has been out. And he says, I'm talking about nonsense, because that's not in the report. So we can see how we're served. Now, Kaichor News inserted that although I mentioned it, I didn't quote directly from the report. So I'm quoting directly from the report now, and I'll share the 2 pages from the report. So then we don't have any doubt about it in the minds of either Kaichor News or the minister, what I'm speaking about, because they can verify that in the report. But it just goes to tell you that our Minister of Finance clearly is not even doing what he's supposed to do. Then we saw the Minister of Finance went to a meeting in China, Infrastructure Investment Summit, the 6th and the 7th of June. I'm still trying to find out who went with him. So we heard that they had some discussions on the sidelines with private companies, and the private companies indicated that they will not get funding from the Chinese government for that model of the bridge that they were pursuing, given that the ambassador had already in the public domain pointed out that it's an archaic approach to building a bridge, that is a 3-lane bridge with still opening. And so obviously in China, Jordan made a decision to throw away their own feasibility study that we spent over $150 million on which examined that specific option, a 3-lane option, and concluded that it was only feasible at that location. He threw it away in China, came back on the 17th of June, announced that they're changing the model. No doubt this model is suitable to the companies that he had discussions with in China. So when the minister says, I see in July 4th, Kaichor News will make public all documents on financiers behind the public-private partnership. Well, clearly, the whole way this project, the bridge is being conceptualized, doesn't lead us to have any confidence about the transparency of the project. And I am very, very concerned when ministers go abroad and strike deals with companies abroad and then come back and change the circumstances, even throw away their own feasibility study for the purpose of expediency and maybe for other purposes. You know what I'm talking about. The next thing I mentioned at the press conference last week, that I urged the government to come clean on the hydro, tell us clearly whether we are pursuing the hydro or not, and all of the issues that they had claimed were corrupt, including the FIP Motilal contract, that they should release the evaluation report. So then the public can decide whether there was any illegality in the award of the contract. Now, you would recall my point, and today the Prime Minister wrote a letter, it's in the newspapers, explaining our position that when we went out to tender, that was the lowest evaluated bid. You had several other contractors who had higher bids. Just imagine if we had given a contractor at a higher bid, they would claim it's corruption. They're claiming it's corruption because we give it to the lowest evaluated tender. This government, in many of the hinterland roads now, is giving the bid, their award, making the award to contractors who have the highest bid, higher than 19 other persons, because they're close to the collation. But they're complaining about this one with FIP Motilal that was awarded to the lowest contractor. Now, as the Prime Minister pointed out in his letter, the government paid only based on measured works. So only if you complete a piece of road and it's measured by the engineer, that's when you get payment. So even the 15 million was not paid. But this is what he had to say. Yes, I heard him saying that the Motilal contract was legitimate. But like this man ain't shame, this man ain't not shame. You're not telling me 3 education evaluators sat down. This is the Minister of Finance, and gave a road to be in a jungle to a man who never built a footpath. So I mean, we are not that ignorant. And so why not release the evaluation report? So it's simple. You should release. Why does this government, after claiming when it was in opposition that it would release all of these contracts and all the evaluation report, sit for dear life, hang on, hide an evaluation report or a contract signed by the PPP, and why would they do it? It defies logic. The only logical conclusion here is they can't find any of the corruption they talk about in these reports. So they're reluctant to release the reports because the reports would show that either the evaluation report or the contracts, that these were projects done above board. But I'm not going to go into any great detail on this one too, because the Prime Minister has dealt with it extensively in a letter. You'd recall I mentioned that Badal, in the last press conference, that Badal, we believe that there was some unusual happening that led to the reduction of the shares, the government shares in Ghana Stockfeed from 38% of the company when we left office. Now that has been reduced to 7%. So we asked the government to give an explanation. Bharrat gave the explanation. So his explanation is to say that Jagdeo is telling lies and causing mischief, that there was no deal. So I don't want to go through everything, but he insisted that the courts in 2017 awarded the contract. He won the appeal. And that may very well be so. My point is that this matter was, he tried to water down the government shares in 2000 through a rights issue. Now today, later today, I'm going to issue a comprehensive press release on Bharrat explaining this. I don't want to spend too much time at a press conference, just to give you an idea. We went to the courts, and in 2008, Justice Jainarayan Singh ruled that their rights issue was illegal and restored the government 38% in Guyana Stock Feed Limited. This is what Bharrat said. Bharrat said that I'm quoting now directly from the article in Kaichur News, said that he was later told the judge was threatened by Jagdeo to rule the way he did or risk not receiving his pension. So he's saying the judge restored the government share, not Jagdeo's share, the government share, because Jagdeo threatened him on his pension. I could easily say, I was told, as he was told, that he was trying to bribe the judge. And I was told that what happened last year is that when the matter came up in the appeal court, I was told that Bharrat, who is a financier and a campaigner for the AFC, had discussions with the bigwigs in government, and they did not put up a proper defense. I'm not even sure any defense to the case. So, by default, we lost the case. So they did not defend the government's right to this 38% shares that was restored by the courts. Now, at that time, it would have been valued about $1 million US. By now, it's about that, the 38% will be about $5 million US. So I was told, as he was told there, about what I said to the judge, that they struck a deal. Why did the government, if it lost the case there, why didn't it appeal it to the CCJ? We're talking about $5 million of taxpayers' resources now. But it's all gone to Bharrat. They accepted it. They didn't appeal it further to the CCJ, and I'm not even sure they put up a defense. You recall the other settlements, a similar pattern with some of the settlements in the past. They decided not to pursue the court option, but to sit in private rooms and negotiate deals. That is why I believe that in this case, the taxpayers of Guyana have lost about $5 million in a deal that was struck between the government and Bharrat, who is a financier of the AFC, a big financier of the AFC. But I will, since Bharrat came out to talk about that, I'm going to issue a press release today about his other dealings. And I hope that the GRA is paying attention to this too, because many of you know that the gentleman incorporated a company in Trinidad and Tobago with the exact same name as Guyana Stock Feed Limited, which is a public company with multiple shareholders in Guyana. But a company that he incorporated in Trinidad, and the name is Guyana Stock Feed Inc., the same name, he owns that 100%. So the GRA has to examine whether there was transfer pricing. But I'm sure that this GRA here will get an instruction not to pay attention to that. But in the press release, you will see about how Popeyes was connected to it too, and how the edible oil company was also connected to it. Later, I'm going to issue a press release. Since Barrel, I didn't want to go after him. I thought the government should give answers. But since he wants to give answers, then let's bring it on, because these are the same ones who were on the platform shouting PPP is corrupt. Now it's time to prove it. They can't. But on the other hand, they have a ton of skeletons in their closet. Ton of skeletons. And you will see this later today. Now, coming back to the NISIL share, the issue of not the share but the bond. So you'd recall we have now, the first one was to raise part of the money, the first part of the money, and then there was about $17 billion. And then just recently, they issued another placement memorandum to raise $13.5 billion. So that will take you just around 30 or above $30 billion. So what's different here? So after we criticized the first one, which says, didn't mention anything about Gaisuko, it just said that the money was being raised for long-term capital projects in Guyana. I've noticed a change in the second one, which now says it's for capital projects in Gaisuko, and also for operational expense of Gaisuko. So they have made a change in the second $13.5 billion that they're going to raise. That has been one of the changes. I haven't examined it thoroughly as yet to see what are the other changes. But so last week we asked to see the leadership of the GAU, and we spoke extensively about what discussions they've been having with the SPU about the sugar industry. And so I want to refer you back to a press release that was issued by GAU, because we felt that we were asking questions of SPU that they were not prepared to give to us through the public domain. What are you going to spend the money on that you're going to raise? And where is your plan? So we saw a press release from GAU on April 21st, 2018, and we asked them to explain, because in that press release they said the following things. They were brief and they said the following things. We learned that over 70% of that sum would be spent towards improving cane production and productivity through the purchase of machines, rehabilitation of drainage and irrigation infrastructure, fix the dilapidated bridges and revetments, etc. So the second part was the establishment of 2 cogeneration plants at Albion and Islet Estates. And the third aspect was to establish a refinery for white sugar. So this is what GAU was told by the SPU. But GAU, at the end of that press release, made a critical point. They said, this is a collection of ideas, but could we have a copy of the plan? And until today, they have not seen the plan. They've just been told generally that these are some of the things. And in fact, they said, it wasn't the SPU that said 70% that will be spent on the rehabilitation of the industry, but it was the Gaisuko CEO who said they needed that sum of money to be spent there. So clearly, what we thought was light at the end of the tunnel, that we were finding out a bit more about what the money would be spent on, We're not clearer, neither GAU, nor the opposition, nor the sugar workers. And SPU does not have a plan until today. So just listen to some basic common sense. So I was thinking, and I raised this with GAU. You raise $30 billion, you borrow the money now, you put it into an account, you then say, we're spending some of it on cogeneration, 2 cogeneration plants, and a refinery. You have to do the feasibility study for these. You have to design the factories. You have to go out to award a tender, go to advertise, and then award contracts. So we're talking about minimum a year and a half before even awarding a contract. But you borrowed the money already now, and you're sitting on it, and interest starts accruing immediately. So guess what happens? If you borrow 30 million at 4.75%, and you don't spend it in a year and a half, assuming they spend all within a year and a half, but if they don't spend it, you have to pay over 2.2 billion in a year and a half in interest alone. $2.2 billion by just sitting down on the money. You didn't need to borrow it all now. You could have phased the borrowing if that was the idea. Borrow as much as you need now and then go back to the market subsequently. They did it all at once, borrowed the money, sitting on it now, and not using it. Can't use it. And the government will have to start paying interest and will pay 2.2 billion. That's common sense. Even a child will tell you that's nonsense. But they're doing it at a larger scale, which will cost the Treasury 2.2 billion in a year and a half. Imagine the school children grant, the $10,000 grant every year cost us only 1.6 billion. And we didn't have money for that. But we're going to be wasting 2.2 billion by just inefficiency, well, not incompetence. So this is another issue I thought I'd bring to your attention. There are hundreds of questions that I would like to raise and to interrogate on this issue, but it just gives you a snippet of what we're faced with on a daily basis. You saw it with Badal case. Private deals, incompetence, etc. Excuses from Jordan. He didn't see the Article 4 consultation up to now. I have a copy here, and I'm going to share the parts with you. This is what we get from the government. Now, we've seen today that the government said that it's going to be this Starbuck News article about solar power plant to unlock Norway dollars. So you know that $80 million that's sitting in the IDB was earned under the PPP government. Nearly 200 of the $250 million that we signed, the agreement we signed with Norway for the sale of forest carbon, was transferred to the government of Guyana and has been sitting in various accounts. Some of it will be spent on hinterland ICT, 17 million. 10.5 million was for Amerindian land titling. 80 million was set aside for Myla Falls. Some was set aside for small loans to people who were going in the green sector, grants, etc., for people. Some were going to go to the University of Guyana for the Center for Biodiversity Studies, etc. Some for mitigation purposes, adaptation, new types of crops that are drought resistant or flood resistant, as the case may be. So that money was earned by the PPP. So this 80 million that they are trying to unlock is money that is already earned from the past. So I expected when the government would have undertook this trip to Norway, they would have had a comprehensive discussion with Norway. And the discussion should have resulted in clarity about how we are going to receive the final tranche on the original agreement. That's one, to take us up to 250 or thereabouts. That's number two, we would have received clarity about the status of the negotiation for the new agreement, because that was envisaged under the PPP that once the first agreement was concluded for 250 million, we would start working on a new agreement for another 250 million thereabouts. So we should have had a report on that. Nothing so far. And then, as is typical now, but it seems as though the only purpose of this trip was to try to get the $80 million that we've earned and is in a bank account, permission from Norway to spend that money. And this is so typical of this government. Nothing new conceptually, only trying to unlock or spend what the PPP has already left. East Coast Road, West Coast Road, their bypass, almost everything. The airport is their flagship project now. That was signed under us. Everything. So this is typical. So they went there to get that money, the 80 million to spend. Now, interestingly, the Starbuck News article mentioned Porfirio. They quoted him some time back as saying a number of things. But this is what he said some time back when they were trying to unlock the money. He said Guyana needs to establish a credible pathway to a clean and renewable energy transition in line with its nationally determined contributions and our original agreement. So remember, our government made a pledge to the Paris that they will achieve 100% renewable energy by 2025. So the gentleman from Norway was saying, you have to show us how you're going to get there, consistent with the LCDS, the agreement on the LCDS we had with the previous government, and with this. He said this must be done through a public policy document with a formal status. Now, this is quite clear. A public policy document with a formal status. So what did our government take to Norway as the public policy document with a formal status? It cannot be the Green State Strategy, because that is still in its conceptual phase. Right now it's hollow. It's just declarative statements. It's a political strategy. It has no formal approval by the National Assembly. So that makes it, that fulfills the second part of having a formal status, because it has not been debated in the National Assembly. So the Green State thing is just conceptually there. Secondly, the Green State Strategy has had no widespread public consultation. And these were safeguards placed in the Norwegian agreement. So if Norway agrees to use the money by passing these safeguards, they're weakening the safeguards of the original agreement. And we have to examine that carefully. So, on the energy itself, coming back to the energy mix, we heard a series of lies about Amila up to today. Then we heard there was an IDB energy mix study that the government has refused to release to the public. So right now, the public is in the dark about, literally in the dark, about what our energy demand will be, how we will meet that demand for example, through solar, wind, gas, whatever, hydropower, what role they will play in meeting that demand. There's been no comparison of the cost of energy, like what would solar cost versus gas versus hydropower. No such comparisons. So we are in the total dark, but they have gone to Norway and said something there and presented some document that we don't know about, that they're unwilling to give us. Now, if the small solar units are anything to go by in the interior, those are marred with corruption, because a lot of them are given to party activists there. So we have a lot of questions to ask, because we have not seen any clear framework for renewable energy in Guyana. Natural gas is not renewable. It's cleaner than the other types of fossil fuel, but it's still a fossil fuel. So we will be asking the government, we'll be insisting that we get these, and we would like to see what they give Norway. We like to see how all the safeguards in the Norwegian agreement would be met. Not just these safeguards, but how the money will be spent transparently, what the tender process will be. And so we're going to be, because these were internationally determined, as part of the model, we had to have a model that could be replicated to see that the money is not wasted and it goes for purposes that were truly national. So we're going to be examining, we have a ton of questions about how this is done, but we feel that somehow they may have duped the Norwegian by presenting some document there that says that this has a formal status. We don't know anything about any energy strategy now in Guyana, not being discussed here, that's now reached the parliament. We're not clear about it. And imagine, GPL is still without a functioning board 7 months into the year. And they're still looking at this. So we need to get to a bit of, again, the blame game. Regional health officers pilfering drugs, medical supplies, blame for shortages. It's not the people who are stealing the drugs, it's the procurement system, and when the minister's directing who to buy from at a high price in breach of all the tender laws of the country. The Public Procurement Commission has ruled on that already, and yet we continue to find the teachers, they can't trust Granger's administration to honor any contract. It is true. It is true. We see the Prime Minister now, our dear Prime Minister, so Granger goes to Vietnam, and he goes south to the Rupununi. And he was reminiscing fondly about the same mountain that he went up with Dr. Jagan. But he said at that Tushau's meeting, the regional Tushau's meeting, he was the first non-Amerindian minister in Guyana. Now, I couldn't believe it, but then I should have really believed it. So could you please get a copy of his tape, and then you will see how bad he has gotten. That he was the first Amerindian minister in Guyana. I told you that he tells so many lies that he can't differentiate now which is a lie and which is the truth. He needs serious help. And then he goes, his colleague said that we helped to rig the Tushau's elections. So Garrido Low and Sidney Alicock said on June 21st, 2018, that the PPP helped to rig the Tushau's elections. Obviously, they were not very happy the results. Then Nagamutu says, Rupununi Tushau's have all refuted allegations of rigging. So he's basically tell telling Sidney Alicock and Garrido Lowe that they were lying. This might be one instance when he actually is truthful, which is a rare thing for him. And then they go on again. Is this not? So this was prepared before they went into the Rupunoni to share out to the two shows. Linden Lethem Road, progress on Linden Lethem Road. Just look at the images now, and they have made enormous progress on the Linden Lethem Road. This is it. A resource station. The resource station is mired in controversy because they wanted to go into Napi, and the village been arguing that they have to get assurances about the extension of their land title before they agree to anything of this nature. And that resource station, in any case, conceptually, it was started under the PPP. The Lethem Tongue, Granger delivers a plaque to them, and that's the progress in the tongue. You go and see what is happening. Nothing on the industrial estates. An aerial view of Conishan. This is the progress. I can go on, but you see how a lease approved to an individual in the Rupunoni who doesn't live there, but not a single lease to any Amerindian community, or not lease, land title, since they got into office. They gave one that was prepared under the PPP, 3 years, but the progress is they gave a lease to an individual in Rupunoni. This is how pathetic DPI and the government has become. And this is, it followed here. Coming soon, like a movie, this is the trailer, New Demerara Bridge, coming soon. Yeah, they should put this at the mall there, Giffland in there. Leg 1 online, that's a PPP project, the Huawei project. The Region 3 joins fight to combat terrorism. We have so many terrorists in Region 3 that they join the fight. They should just focus on the daily criminal activities that's ravaging our country now. But they're fighting terrorism in Region 3 now. That's it. It's on Parika to become gateway town. Now we started, if you go to we borrowed some money years ago from the CDB. It's called the Secondary Towns Infrastructure Project. And we put in some infrastructure in Parika, Bartika, etc. Because we believe all of these things must precede the declaration of a township. That you have to get the quality up and people's agreement. They think it's just, as Vulcan said, you have to have tongues everywhere. So no focus on real issues. We have a government, again, I have to say, that is drifting all over the place. Now, you may ask me about the PPP and when we would select our presidential candidate, and we had a meeting last Friday. Friday, the executive met. We have to meet again. As I said before, the Central Committee will meet within 2 months. But I've urged the EXCO to settle on a timeline. A timeline that is not dragged out. In fact, a timeline that would address the matter expeditiously. So the party will examine this, and then they will settle on a timeline. And then we will formally kickstart the process. Thank you. Yeah.
And speaking about the Badal scenario, you said that you're going to point out instances of transfer pricing, and you stated that GRA will be told to ignore this. Are you speaking on assumptions, or were you told that GRA is being given instructions from the government?
I know that people in GRA take instructions from the Office of the President and from the Minister of Finance. I know that people in Soku are given instructions. They're given instructions as to what to do in relation to charging PPP people. And let me say it clear that I want to assure you that the government will try to charge every single person that they see as a potential frontrunner for the PPP's presidential candidate. In fact, that was discussed, and it is already in train. People have received their instructions, and I will not be surprised that we see it being rolled out shortly, that the PPP's frontrunner for the presidential candidate will all be charged. This is so. Several bodies have been receiving instructions, independent bodies that have been receiving instructions from the executive as to how to act. The fuel smuggling that is taking place, which is causing a massive leakage to the Treasury, people are turning a blind eye to it. They know how the players are. They're turning a blind eye because they have official protection, the smugglers. So that's to answer your question.
I'll follow up with the question, and then I have two other questions. Do you think that they can actually find things to charge every PPP frontrunner on? One, and two, Nandlal, in one of his articles, the unruly horse, said that the PPP, the government is coming to you in that they charge Ashley Singh and they charge Cesar and Kausar because they know of your presidential immunity, so they're trying to come down the line of finance ministers. Is this a concern of yours?
It's not a concern of mine. They will. It's not just about me. It is about all the aspirants, the serious aspirants that they believe will pose a threat to them, and therefore they will want to deplete the leadership of the People's Progressive Party. They will not succeed. This government doesn't have to find much to charge people in a fanciful, in a capricious manner. Just imagine, after hearing about the tens of billions that were misappropriated by the PPP, look at the nature of the charges of our members of parliament so far. You will see how frivolous they are, given the accusations that were made. And so they will, if they go back to 1995 when I was Minister of Finance or so, and charge me, it's no problem. Chedi Jagan was the president at that time. I don't have any issue. We'll defend all those cases and they will be thrown out. They have no case, absolutely no case. But the point is not winning cases. The point is damaging reputations, and secondly, appeasing those who say that you misled us into saying the people are corrupt. Why don't you charge them now? So any charge will suffice. Whether it succeeds or not is another issue. And so that is how I see it.
Okay. Sir, you read the article with the finance minister on Amal Falls. He said that
I dealt with that extensively at the beginning.
Oh.
You weren't here, so please look at it. Okay, all right.
Thank you. And secondly, sir, no one else from your party, the political opposition, is represented at these press conferences. Why?
Yeah. Because it's the leader of the opposition press
So
conference.
no other member of
Yeah.
the opposition you would like to invite?
Yeah, well, they would, that's for me to determine, yes. But would you like to make a suggestion?
No, I don't, but I was just hearing
Okay,
from inside
yes,
sources
okay.
that there's a
Yeah.
concern about that.
Okay, I will, on the recommendation from Kaichor News. Since Kaichor News has such the PPP's interest so much at heart.
It's not the PPP's interest.
Oh,
you guys
okay,
represent
all
the
right,
constituents,
okay,
if you
sure.
remember that.
Sorry, Mr. Jagdeo, the government is moving to forest island in a few years as well as 100% alternative energy.
Yeah, sure.
Do you predict, as an economist and former president, do you predict possibly a collision course when it comes to their crafting policies and legislation and stuff like that? Because you're going to have something that's promoting oil and gas, and then you have something that's actually the opposite.
There is an entire policy vacuum now because this is precisely what the government is now doing. So it goes off to Norway. It makes an announcement that we want 100% renewable by 2020. Not 2020, 2025. It then goes out to advertise for a 50 megawatts gas-fired power plant. That has disappeared now from the horizon, totally disappeared. So a year has passed since they made that advertisement. No update about what is happening there, disappeared. They go often, the president goes to India, talks about a solar state. They come back, they want to look at solar energy replacing hydropower now. Still have not answered the questions as to whether this is possible, given the storage needs. I can understand during the day, but there's enormous storage needs and the capacity for this, and the need to replace batteries, whether it could become base load, and what happens if for 4 days or so you have overcast conditions in the country. For 4 days and you don't, very little solar energy, what happens then? No, nothing. You have to put in. If that's the case, you will have to then put in, if you get 80 megawatts or 100 megawatts of solar energy, you may have to put in another 100 megawatts of backup energy to when for that period you don't have solar power, you'd have to switch over. These are questions that need to be answered. And so we hear about all this green state economy, but we don't hear about how oil and gas will fit into all of this. But this is not unusual for this government. This is just a pattern. This is just a pattern. You don't hear anything from them on any issue.
My second question is, you have this information on Mr. Badal. Is this new information, or you would have had this information before? I mean,
We've been saying it over and over. Maybe now people will look at it differently. This has been in the public domain, but everybody was looking, they were making all the accusations against the PPP, unreasonably so. We are doing it factually. I'm not saying I believe that Badal incorporated a company with the same name in Trinidad and Tobago. I'm saying he did. And billions of dollars of business from Guyana Stock Feed Limited in Guyana was done by that company. So I'm saying that in an affirmative way. They used to say, oh, they steal 28 billion, 30 billion, etc. General kinds of things. So now, but you see the environment is very different now. The same media that was hounding the PPP every day about corruption, who owned the Marriott, Now we now know it's 100% owned by the government. And who own all of these things, like gas stations and a whole range of stuff. I don't want to go back there. Why don't they go after these now? You have a ton of people building. Almost every minister now is in the field building something. So why don't they ask them too the same questions? Why don't their houses, the ministers' houses now, get the front page or become part of the article? It is the reality of life in Guyana. It's a reality of life that somehow people are not interested in this corruption now. Look at the drug bond. Anybody with any modicum of sense would know it's a corrupt deal. Nothing. It goes on with impunity. The man gets their money every month, and we're happy about it. And they're talking about what he received. So he would receive from the government $174 million a year, and that is the entire, for example, the entire land we sold on the 10 acres that we sold was $180 million on the East Coast. But they're running behind that, although it's sold way above the market value and 700 times higher than the price that they sold Tulsi Prasad an acre for. That is corrupt. But the bond, nobody wants to examine that. And look at the DPP's position on it. The DPP says, we can't move forward now because the police didn't investigate it. You think we could ever get the police to investigate these things? Ramjatan would tell them not to.
Mr. Jagdeo, I want to know if you've spoken with Charles Ramson since his announcement to express to him some of the things you told us at the press conference, the party contribution and all of that. And secondly, on Gao, I saw that the union went to court to force the government to pay the remaining severance. Do you think that was a wise move given what happened with the bail situation?
Well, they can always, if the government, I think it's a wise move on the part of the union. We support that. In fact, we are hoping to go jointly, but they have local standard. There is no timeline that the government has given. So if the court case forces them to give a timeline, and then they say, but we can't make the payment because there is a court case, GAU can easily withdraw the court case and have the workers pay. But right now, they're raising all of this money. There's confusion at the board, but the workers can't get their severance. So I support it. And no, I've not spoken with him.
Any particular reason why you have not?
I wanted to discuss this at the party level before, because what people have an interest in doing is personalizing these things. So I don't want it to be personalized, like I'm telling any person to toe a particular line. My job as General Secretary of the party is to state the position of the party, which is what I did at the last press conference. I said we have a process, an age-old process, and unless the Central Committee changes that, that's a process that's going to be used again. Every candidate would have an opportunity to pursue into that process to make their claim or to pursue their whatever they want, if their ambition, they're through that process. And this thing about young versus old and stuff like that, I don't think I need to defend my record on that. My record as president saw the youngest cabinet in the history of Guyana. The youngest cabinet in the history. And since I became General Secretary, we have probably one of the youngest Central Committee and Executive Committee in the party. And I am all in favor of giving young people opportunities. I myself was given an opportunity when I was named Minister of Finance. So I'm in favor of young people pursuing ambition too. What I stated is a process, how we have to pursue that ambition. But anyone, that's not to deny them the right to pursue their ambition.
Mr. Jagdeo, did you have any discussions with the President concerning police commissioner? And who, in your view,
No, he has not invited me. He has not invited us.
And who your view should have the brother? Looking at the
I think it would be unwise of me to state a preference here, not having a consultation with the president, not hearing the process through which he determined who he wants as commissioner of police. So whenever that comes up, whenever that opportunity presents itself, I'll make my views known there, and then I'd let the media know. After that, I think it's not ethical for me to do that before I go there.
Mr. Jagdeo, sir, could you say how many places in the Central Committee now have to be filled as a result of death or resignations, and how soon those may be filled if in fact there are placements?
Well, thankfully we don't have any debt, and we didn't have any resignation.
So all
You have
35
35 are in place, all 35.
And did you at all in any way silently put up Mr. Ramsey to float his availability?
Well, people, that is precisely why I do not want to, examine. People ask me about which candidate I support and what my view on a particular candidate. I will not do so publicly because I don't want to get involved in that speculation. That's speculation. One group says online thinks I am slaughtering the gentleman. Another group thinks that I have put him up to this.
Did you?
No, I did not. I did not. But this is it. And at the end of the day, I know what's going on. People are entitled to their views on Facebook, social media, etc. But really, common sense says that, and you would see, so many of those people are well-wishers, they would state their views, etc. But a lot of them are not sympathetic to the PPP too. I've seen some known PPP haters who will find something about any candidate we put up. The moment, even the ones they are advocating for now, they will find negative things to say about them. So they're part of the mix in helping to determine who will be our candidate. And they were, online. That is why we have to avoid at all costs that process of selecting or getting into that, at least formally, the party of what's taking place online. People state their preferences. There's a lot of nasty things being said about different candidates, and I say to people, please don't. I don't tolerate that. We should not say negative things about people. People have a right to say, I'm interested. They have a right to say that. But the nasty things that I've seen online about being said about candidates and by trolls, you can clearly see that profiles are fabricated, made up, and to disparage one or another of the candidate. So we would stay far away from that. At the end of the day, the party will determine this, the members, and like any organization, you tell Basil Williams and Harman that it is the people on Facebook who will determine the PNC's choice. Or so they would scoff at it. Yet they want us to do the same thing. They want us to be determined here. Yeah. But one thing I want to say on that basis, that the activists on the ground, we have thousands of them, even now. We have about 12 days more, 13 days more, not 12, about 11 days more for the registration exercise. I wanted to say to them publicly, please continue doing what you're doing. That's important. That's the important thing to win an election. getting people on the voters list, getting them to register, taking them out to now be registered. That's important grassroots work, and thousands of people are engaged in that process now, and many of our leaders. The other stuff is distraction. There'll be a time to resolve it.
Mr. Jagdeo, what's wrong with stating openly one's availability? Is there something wrong with that in keeping with the party's principles or practice?
Did you hear me just now, Dennis?
Yes, but last week you
No, but
last week you criticized
yeah.
Mr. Ramsey, now you were saying
No, I'm not getting into that. What I say, if someone says I'm available, is different than outlining a whole things why others should not be there. That's it, availability, why others should not get a job. You know, you'd have a chance there to compete against them. You'll get a fair chance. But you can state availability. And that is what and any attempt to compare that with people who have in the past stated availability is unusual. Yes, please. Guyana?
What the VP presidential candidate is. Are you absolutely confident about it?
Yes, I am confident of a PPP victory. We're going to win these elections. That's why there is so much attention being paid to our presidential who we select, because that person will be the president.
Mr. Jagdeo, in determining the presidential candidate, will you be taking into consideration the concerns you have that the government may be trying to charge potential presidential candidates, like when you do an elimination process, like maybe they can charge this person like something?
Yes, but my own view is that they can charge anyone. Anyone. They can make up stuff and charge anyone. So given how frivolous many of the charges are. But that will be for the members, the 35 members, to discuss. You know, when we discuss that issue, we'll have to examine that. But they can charge anyone, they can make any claim. I wouldn't put it past them.
Mr. Jagdeo, seeing
Yeah.
Naveris here again, Chronicle, seeing that we spoke a bit about the elections, would you be able to talk a bit about the party's preparation, LG, and whether
Okay.
the party has faced any challenges so far?
No, we've been having discussions at the party level on the framework to guide all of the party groups across the country, the NDCs, our supporters, etc., as to how we approach the local government elections. You'd recall the last time we sent a directive that we would like to have a model where it's 50% party and 50% of the candidates non-party, from prominent people in society, civil society, etc. So that was the last local government election. So once we're in discussion, it's the elements of that framework, and as soon as the registration is over, because we don't want to distract our structures and the activists from that work, we will then send this document which will guide them in the search process at the local level for good candidates to contest the local government election. So we will start working very early on that. Then we are also determining our platform. For example, we know already in New Amsterdam, I will go to New Amsterdam to campaign and say to people, look, you voted for APNU the last elections here. What was the result? 100% increase in your rates and taxes. That's what voting for APNU in New Amsterdam meant to you. On the other hand, all the PPP areas that were won, the areas that we won, we made it clear to the NDCs we don't support bringing more hardships on families. And so they did not increase the rates and taxes. So those are the kinds of things. In Georgetown itself, we want to talk to them about this slush fund, which we believe is stolen by some of the people. That the 50-something million that was given by the government to the city council to give to some people in Georgetown to spend in their communities, that more than half of that money will disappear and you will not get any work done on the ground. But that was recently handed over as campaign money for the APNU people, APNU AFC people. So we are working on a framework where to do that, to contest the local government election.
Tennis personal static news in relation to LGE. There have been some changes to quite a few of the LGUs. As your party been provided with mappers yet as to what exactly those changes are? You expecting, you asking for it? What's happening with that? A few constituencies have disappeared.
Yes.
Have constituencies been merged? What's
Yes,
happening?
sure. You know, we have expressed concern about this, and there was a full-fledged debate in the National Assembly where those concerns were reiterated by our speakers. So we still believe that the minister is acting capriciously in doing this. Just imagine, you declare an area a township, Madia, without consulting and having the agreement of the residents. You introduce new local government, a body, without consulting the people in the area whether they want it or not. You reduce constituencies without doing that. But the minister has the power. So under the act, so he does it unilaterally, and then he claims it's that people want this. They have not tested the ground whether people actually want this. But as we pointed out, it's gerrymandering in the narrow NDCs where the voting was closed. So if you alter the configuration of the seats, you can win, the APNU can win those areas. And similarly, they created some new areas in pockets that are predominantly APNU vote with the hope of winning a few more NDCs. So we're gonna look at this. We've been calling for greater transparency, but given the presentation of the minister in Parliament, I don't have much hopes that there will be much of that. Anything else? Thank you.